Okay, we'll get started. Good evening. Welcome to Marxism 101, a crash course in Marxism and education for parents. We are so glad you're here tonight to learn about this very much talked about but little understood issue of Marxism. We quote it a lot. We say, that's Marxist. And we have a general idea of what that means, but the breadth and depth of that topic is far greater than just that's Marxist. So we're having a crash course because this is important to really understand. Like, we know that Marxism is at play in our country, but exactly how and through what mechanisms? How is it affecting our kids? That's what we're going to go over tonight. So a little more of a deep dive, but a crash course into Marxism. Let's see here. As you can see, we have a pretty straightforward agenda tonight. I'll open us, and then Kathy Harms will open us in prayer, and we'll hear from Chi Van Fleet, who survived Marxist education and indoctrination under Mao Zedong in the Chinese Cultural Revolution, and Dr. James Lindsay, expert on Marxist ideology and author of the recent book, Marxification of Education. So let's get started right away. Please bow your heads.
Good evening. If you could just bow your heads for a moment, we're going to take this and commit this night to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, that you call us not to put another God before you. And as this conversation shifts to something that sounds political, it really becomes a godiment and a God before you. And Lord, we're living under the reality in these days of other gods that have been put before our families and before our children. We have learned recently the hard way, when you sow the wind, you will reap a whirlwind. We've seen the whirlwind of anger, of dissension, of strife, of violence, of licentiousness. We've seen those things, Father, in a generation that has been brought up, Father, void of you, Lord. And God, we beseech you and come before you tonight, and we humbly ask, Father, that you raise a new generation, that this is a night that speaks to the next generation, where one generation walks away from you and we see the kind of whirlwind. It takes only one generation, Father, that serves you to restore. So we're asking for your redeeming power tonight to work through these speakers that will reveal once again the redeeming power of the cross of Jesus Christ, that will once again reveal the difference between light and darkness, and that people that are here tonight would leave with wisdom and discernment and the knowledge of you, Father, and the knowledge that there is a difference between light and darkness, and that we will sow good seed tonight, and we will reap a harvest coming forward that would bear fruit for the kingdom and fruit that would remain. We just pray these things in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm the chapter chair for the Williamson County chapter of Moms for Liberty. I'm a mother of 3. Their ages are 2, 6, and 8, and my 6-year-old son is with us tonight. He wanted to see what mom does. I'm also a veteran. I flew the B-1, and I'm a stay-at-home mom for my kids, and I'm battling for their future and the future of all the kids of Williamson County. So our chapter of Moms for Liberty started on April 19th, 2021. So we are 2 days shy from exactly 2 years from starting in my living room to today presenting Marxism 101. So this event tonight is part of our 2022 to 2023 school year for parents. It's a year-long initiative that we have undertaken, and if you look at that arrow, it's almost done. It has been a lot of work. We've been focusing on one critical issue in our children's schools per month and analyzing it from multiple angles in order to fully understand it and therefore how we can advocate for our children. The April focus is History of Marxism Education, which helps us to understand the present situation of Marxism in education and what it looks like today. So in previous months, we have covered critical race theory, social emotional learning, gender ideology, restorative justice, comprehensive sexuality education, and graphic material, i.e. porn in the library. Tonight, we're going to show you how all of these issues wrap together to bolster the Marxist pedagogy going on in American education. Mind you, this is only a crash course. It really deserves a year of study in and of itself. So as part of our topical focus each month, we aim to do 5 things. We have assigned reading in our book club that best covers that topic. We have a 101 crash course. We publish a parents' true or false quiz that you can test your knowledge at the end of the month. We do a Sunday post which approaches this issue from a biblical angle, and then we publish a parent toolkit in our online resource library. And also at the end of the month, we render our best assessment of where the ideology is in Williamson County schools on a scale of 1 to 10. So, question, what do these men have to do with your child's education? Who knows the answer? Almost everything. So you're looking at Herbert Marcuse, Paulo Freire, Antonio Gramsci, Karl Marx, John Dewey, and Wilhelm Reich. I could have made at least 2 more slides in this format for all the Marxist philosophers that have fed into our children's education. This is just a few of them, and some of the most influential. So Marxism and education. What does it do? Well, it seeks to overturn capitalist societies via revolution in order to seek a socialist utopia. How does it do this? Well, it weakens the societies by dividing people into the proletariat, or the oppressed, and the bourgeoisie, which is the oppressor. And it seeks to sow strife between those two so that the working class will overthrow the ruling class and take control of the country and the means of production. In America, with a strong middle class, cultural Marxism really manifests as critical race theory and critical gender theory, which we see all around us. Hello, Bud Light, right? The most effective revolutions throughout history, and there have been many. There have been some that succeeded, and there's been a lot that failed. But the successful ones, the most successful ones, had a heavy emphasis on the education of children and education. And some of those include the Hitler Youth, not really a Marxist, but a very successful revolution in holding on to power. The Mao Zedong Chinese Cultural Revolution, Kim Il-sung and the North Korean Revolution, Lenin and Stalin in the Soviet Union, and Chavez in Venezuela. What I didn't have room on that slide for, because it's already really wordy, is Castro in Cuba and several others. So Marxist education tools, that includes what I just talked about, all of those ideologies that we've already covered. One thing I did not mention, and that James Lindsay is going to cover in greater detail, is generative themes or generative curriculums. And Williamson County knows all about that because we've already come up against the wit and wisdom curriculum. So that is another pillar of this pedagogy, and we knew it, right? We knew it 2 years ago that something wasn't right, and now it's come full circle, and we know exactly how it fits into the big picture. So revolution can occur in one generation, and that's been proven multiple times by the CCP, the North Korea, and others. The Marxist revolution has cost, or Marxist revolution in the course of history has cost 80 to 100 million lives, making it the greatest human catastrophe known to man. And yet, the left still wants more of it. But we never did it right before, so we're going to try it again. It is hostile to religion. Why? Because it has its own theology. It demands its own religion, and it demands nothing higher than the government or the ideology itself. So therefore, God must be out of the picture. That is why you see so much anti-Christian sentiment lately. And it is also the origin of political correctness inclusivity language codes, because what does it do? It sows intellectual confusion and self-censorship. Even me today, when you have certain dialogues, you're like, what? Let me try to find a different word for that. That is self-censorship. I also fall prey to it, and I'm working my best to break free of that. But that is Marxism at work in our society. So, these are the men who have successfully employed Marxist pedagogy in their revolutions and their hold on to power. That's Hugo Chavez, Mao Zedong, Fidel Castro, Kim Il-sung, Vladimir Lenin, and Adolf Hitler. There's more. Again, I can't make 3 slides on this, but
public is with a well-educated and moral citizenry that can self-govern. So the communists, through Dewey and the teacher unions, intentionally undermined our educational system. Here are a few of the 45 communist goals that were actually read into our congressional record in 1963. Goal number 17, get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of teachers' associations. Put the party line in textbooks. Goal 32. Support any socialist movement to give centralized control over the culture, including education. Goal 41. Emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents. Goal 31. Belittle all forms of American culture and discourage the teaching of American history. Goal 30. Discredit the American founding fathers. Goal 25. Break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books. Goal 28. Eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools. Obviously, they've been very successful.
that was from the film that came out last year called Whose Children Are They? It's an excellent film. You can go online and find it and watch it for yourself. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. So the Communist Manifesto, Marxism at Work, Paulo Freire, critical theory coming in through the Frankfurt School, Karl Marx, how does it all fit together? Let's hear from G. Van Fleet.
The Western tradition, especially in America, parents are the real parents of children, of their children. They are the ones teach their children the value. But the school is taking over that role.
At the heart of it, what we're seeing is a clash of two worldviews. Cultural Marxism and the Western civilization view based on the Judeo-Christian values. And the biggest contrast we're seeing is how children are viewed. In countries like the Soviet Union and East Germany, where I visited, children are seen as belonging to the state. And it's the state's right to teach them about everything, not just reading and writing arithmetic, but ultimate values, ultimate allegiance, and belief systems. Karl Marx was very clear on his view of who children belong to when he said, "The education of all children, from the moment that they can get along without a mother's care, shall be in state institutions."
This is a struggle that's been going on for over a century. Whose children are they? Are they the responsibility of parents or the responsibility of the government? The nuclear family is a protective barrier over the minds of those children. And breaking down the nuclear family has been on the agenda literally since Karl Marx. And there's no better way to get access to the minds of children than through a so-called public school system.
In China, we always taught the children are the successor of the communism. Our real parents are the party and Mao. One of the songs I was taught, and everyone sang, is 爹亲娘亲不如毛主席亲. It's translated as Mao is our real parent.
Again, that's from Whose Children Are They? So, that's the real heart of the issue. Whose children are they? And here's from words about that issue from our own president.
And you've heard me say it many times about our children, but it's true. They're all our children. And the reason you're the teachers of the year is because you recognize that. They're not somebody else's children. They're like yours when they're in the classroom.
What we have learned over the past several years and all the years before that is when they say something, take it seriously. They're not arbitrary words. They mean it, and it sounds kind of like woven in and candy-coated and it can't be that bad. But when you start analyzing what did they really say, it's all right there. And we're going to cover that also tonight. I am honored to introduce Chi Van Fleet. She grew up in Mao's China. She spent the entirety of her school years under the Chinese Cultural Revolution. After high school, she, along with all the urban youths, were forced to work in the field for 3 years to be re-educated by the peasants. It was only following the death of Mao that she was able to go to college. She came to America on a student visa in 1986 to pursue her graduate degree and stayed to become a naturalized American citizen. For the past 30 years, she worked in the field of information management and was never politically involved, like many of us, until 2020. Compelled by her personal experience during the Chinese Cultural Revolution and the realization that what she experienced is taking place here in America, she has committed herself to warn the American people and help them to clearly see what is really happening now in America. Please, a warm welcome for Chi Van Fleet.
So it's on. Okay. And slides. So I just click this.
Yep.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me here. And thank you so much, Mom for Liberty. You're awesome. You really make a difference. I find it amazing that in my lifetime, I experienced 2 most important cultural revolutions in human history. I experienced Mao's great proletarian cultural revolution, which took place from 1966 until Mao's death in 1976, lasted for 10 years. Here I am, thinking that I escaped communism. Not the case. I'm experiencing the second cultural revolution, and that's the American Cultural Revolution. And now I don't have to explain what cultural revolution is. The reason you are here is because you realize that such a revolution is taking place and threatens the very survival of our country. Well, I have to say that especially now, you in Nashville witnessed the most terrific cultural revolution right here in the past few weeks. And now Nashville become the epicenter of the Marxist revolution. And we have to fight back. Okay, there are 2 types of Marxist revolution. And I'm talking about it through the history of China. So before Mao died, he told, reportedly he told foreign visitors that he considered he had made 2 great achievements during his lifetime. One is his revolution in 1949 that successfully overthrew a sitting government, the nationalist government and drove them off China to the little island called Taiwan. And he said he was very proud of his second revolution, which was the great proletarian cultural revolution. So we can see these two revolutions are different. The first one was a revolution, overthrow a government through military forces, right? Using guns and soldiers. And then he founded the People's Republic of China in 1949. The second one, believe it or not, the goal was also to overthrow a sitting government. Which government? His own government. The goal of the Cultural Revolution is to overthrow the CCP. Why? Because he felt like he was no longer in total control of his party. He started to think that the people were not really following him. So in order to do that, he has to launch a revolution. He could use the army. Would that be good? No, that would look like a coup, right? Because he used the military to overthrow his own party. He has a better idea. He is the master manipulator. He has a better idea. He can use a different kind of army. Young people. What kind of young people? Indoctrinated young people. From where? From his government schools. Those are the Red Guards. And that's exactly what we have today. And that's exactly who you saw in Nashville. Okay, so in this way, he would say that's people's will. It's the people who want to overthrow the sitting government, who are corrupt, who no longer represent the will of the people. That's what Mao did for the Cultural Revolution. So he mobilized, not just a few, he mobilized all the young people across China, 11 million total, mobilized them to carry out his revolution, to overthrow his own party so that he will get the power back and get his own people into the position of power so that he has absolute power. Actually, he had more than that. In the process, he became the god for the Chinese people. How do you start having people like that will follow him, the young people? Of course, it all started with indoctrination. And in the picture, you can see it's me. I was in elementary school. When the Cultural Revolution started, I was in my second semester of my first grade. I was turning 7. The Cultural Revolution lasted for 10 years. Do you see that little thing we hold in our hands? Do you know? Anyone know what that is? The Mao's little red book. During the Cultural Revolution, school was closed for 2 years. For 2 years, we had nothing to do except to really look what's going on, what's unfolding in front of our eyes in the Cultural Revolution. I witnessed struggle session. I know by now you probably heard that word. Struggle session of all kinds of people, including the governor of my province. And I saw people being struggled against who are my neighbors. And I saw the destruction, and I saw all kinds of things. So finally, when school opened, we had no class. We had no textbook. It's all banned because the textbook, the CCP's textbooks were not radical enough. Banned. What do we had? Mao's little red book. So we read that little red book from beginning to the end and back and forth and back and forth. We recite everything. That's our Bible. And that's my education. When I finally graduated in high school, I learned very little, but I know Mao's words. I know it by heart. And that I was absolutely indoctrinated, and the only one I believe is Mao. And Mao was our real parent. So after I graduated, you think I would go to college? No, there's nothing going on. College were closed, and only for people who are selected, not someone who take examination and pass examination. No, it's party selected you, and then you go to college. You can be an elementary graduate, but you can go to college because you have good behavior and the party member recommend you. Anyway, nothing for me, nothing for most of the young people. So I was sent to the countryside to get my re-education. Sounds good, right? Re-education. By doing what? Doing physical labor alongside with peasants under the primitive condition. Only after Mao's death, I was able, then the university opened, and I was able to go to college to study English. And later, I was really fortunate, and there was American woman who came to teach in my college, where I was a teacher, from Bowling Green, Kentucky. She helped me to get assistantship. So in 1986, I came to America. Never in my wildest dream that I thought one day I could go to America. So right there across the border, Bowling Green, Kentucky. Anyway, so that's my short story. So today, I'm not going to tell you about what Marxism is. Dr. Lindsay is a much better person to tell you what it is. I'm just going to tell you what it is like to live under communism, to live under a Marxist system as in the educational system, in school, and so that you can compare yourself. When I talk about China, think about here, because it is the same thing that is replayed right here in America. So CCP is not like the Bolshevik in Russia. They took power kind of quickly, you know, so it took them a while to figure out how to do things. And CCP is not the case. CCP have decades of learning from their Russian masters, and they also had the opportunity to practice everything in the occupied area before they took over China. So once they took over China in 1949, they know exactly what to do, and they had everything in place. They're ready to go. One of the first things is school, is secondary school, okay? And also college, but the most important thing for them is secondary school. So what did they do? I can't quite see that. Okay, they are going to destroy everything that was in their education and replace with Marxism. And what was the old thing they want to get rid of? Confusion. And it's just tradition. They want to get rid of it. They want to fundamentally transform. Heard that before? Fundamentally transform the Chinese education system. And they made it very clear. They're not hiding. They made it very clear. The purpose of education is not to train individual. In the traditional Chinese education, they want to make, in Chinese word, 君子. 君子 is like a gentleman or man with virtue. The man that knows right and wrong, man will choose to do the right thing. No more. The purpose of the education now is to train communist successors. The songs we sing is that we are the successor of the socialist cause. That's our goal. And that's why we go to school. And that's a perfect government school that the American school has becoming. And the first thing to do, before you indoctrinate the kids, what you do, you have to train the teachers. Within 2 years after they took over power, they successfully retrained the teachers with all sorts of intensive training, group study, individual study. Every teacher has to pass the examination before they were allowed to go back to the classroom. Took them just 2 years. And those who they consider unreformable, expelled out. So they no longer can be a teacher. So that was their first step. You can't indoctrinate the kids without first indoctrinate the teachers. So once that's in place, they are going to teach the new morality. How do you teach new morality and make the younger generation, the new man, the socialist new man? You have to destroy, abolish religion. So in China is not, was not a really Christian country. Christianity was there, but mainly the tradition is Confucianism, and Buddhism that all have to go. And we were taught, I did not even know what religion was. All I knew that it was superstition. That's only for people who really don't know any better. And so it's opium. I did not know what opium is, but the opium of the mass, it's bad stuff. That's all I knew, that bad stuff. I have no exposure to any religion. So, because they have total control of everything, I just have to listen to them and believe them. So the first thing they did is destroy religion, exactly what's happening here. Any religion is considered a threat to communism, because communism is what? It's a religion itself. In order for it to be in control, everything has to go. So that is the first thing they did, destroy religion. And we were taught the new moral. The new moral. What is it to be a new man, to be a new socialist person or socialist new man? Collectivism. We're taught we're no longer individuals. We're part of the group, and the group has a purpose, and the purpose is prescribed for us by the party. And so as individual, we no longer exist. Individual ambition no longer exists. Our desire is to, they call it, serve the people. Serve the people. Basically is, we do whatever the party asks us to do. And we need to get rid of anything that is self. Self itself need to be abolished. We no longer have any individual desire, ambition, no. Everything is for the party, and anything is by the party. And also, in order for the new morality taking roots, they have to destroy family. They have to destroy family. So from very young age, we are taught, biological parents, they're parents, but they're not real parents. The real parents were the party and Chairman Mao. And my father was really good at keeping records. And so there is an evaluation paper that he saved when I was 3. In kindergarten, and there is a section of it is evaluate moral development, and said that I, at the age of 3, that I knew that Chairman Mao was our great leader, and he lived in Beijing, and he loved his little children, and I want to be his good little child, 3-year-old. And from that time on, and of course, everything we heard is party. And our loyalty should be to nowhere but party, not family. Destruction of family. And then history. It's all the recipe, it's in the playbook that is being used right now. So when the Chinese Communist Party took over the educational system, they retrain the teacher, and they have to redesign the textbook. And they don't have enough time, so they did not focus on anything else like math and reading. They pay attention to what? History. They absolutely focused on rewrite the history. So from day one, they teach children fake history. What I learned in my school was that the whole Chinese 3,000 years history is a struggle, class struggle. It's a story of class struggle. It's a struggle between the oppressors and oppressed. So it's always the oppressor rise up against the oppressed, but they are never successful because they did not have the leadership of communism. But now, under the Mao's leadership, we finished that. We stopped that cycle. Now the oppressed were liberated. That's the lie I was told. And that's why we feel like we should be so thankful to Communist Party because they liberated us. And so history is one part, a very important part of that indoctrination. And so in growing up, we were taught, basically the word love was reserved for the party, Chairman Mao, and the country. And when they talk about the patriotism, it's basically the love of the CCP, love of the party. That's how we use the word love. And we not only taught to love the party, we also taught to hate our enemy. Who are our enemies? Okay. Once the Chinese Communist Party took over, they divided Chinese people, the whole millions of Chinese people, into two categories, black class and red class. Have you ever heard about it? Black class were the people who used to have property, land, whatever, or who failed to stay in line with what party told you to do. Those are called rightists. Once you become black class, you become the enemy of the state. And the children were taught to hate them, not with just a little bit of hate. You hate them with all your soul. Everything we read, everything entertainment, everything the song we're taught is all about love the CCP and hate your enemy. In Chinese, there's two words. One is called people. Once you become black class, you no longer considered people. You immediately lost your humanity. And then I explain what happens when you teach that kind of hate. During the whole Mao's era, they not only taught us the new moral, they also have a new scent. The scent that we all should all follow, the great example that we are supposed to follow, and that is a guy called Lei Feng. He was a Liberation Army soldier, and he died in a car accident at the age of 25. You have to die before you can become a saint. So he was the example that we should follow. And he was the prototype of Red Guards. And what he personified. He had the absolute loyalty to the party. He has boundless love for CCP and for Mao. He has boundless hatred for the enemy. Okay, and that is Red Guards. So it took 16 years, actually, from 1950 to 1966, when the Cultural Revolution started. It took them 16 years to retrain a whole new generation, the Red Guards. That's why they are there when Mao launched the Cultural Revolution. And these young people knew nothing about the old tradition, knew nothing about old China. The only thing they knew is what the party taught them. And I was too young. I was 7. Otherwise, there's absolutely no doubt I'll be part of the Red Guards. So what did they do? Well, they did what Mao asked them to do. There are two reasons for the Cultural Revolution. One is for Mao to take back power. The other is he wants to use this Cultural Revolution to absolutely get rid of any remnants of the old culture. He's going to destroy everything that's still there and replace it with a type of Marxism. And it's not just any type of Marxism. It's Maoism, the most radical type of Marxism. So that's his two goals. So he told the Red Guards that to smash the four olds. You probably heard it by now. Four old. What are the old? Old idea, old tradition, old habit, and old custom. What is it? It's an old way of living and being. It's anything that's traditional has to be smashed. He used the word smash. Okay, so what are they? They're everywhere, right? So the Red Guards went to the temple and toppled down the Buddhist statues. Sounds familiar? And they destroy everything that they could find that they think is old, including street names. So in the picture up there is this Red Guards change the traditional street name into something revolutionary. In the picture it said anti-revisionism road. You probably don't know what revisionism is. Revisionism refers to the new Russian communism. After Stalin died, Khrushchev denounced Stalin and denounced his cult of personality. And Mao thought that was a threat to himself and called them revisionism. He wanted the old Leninism. So that's just absolutely crazy. During the Cultural Revolution, the whole world was our enemy, including Russia. So anyway, they changed that into anti-revisionism road. And now we see this happening in America. And before Cultural Revolution, Mao launched endless campaigns, almost like nonstop. But mostly the campaign affect a group of people, either peasants or intellectuals or CCP cadre, not Cultural Revolution. Cultural Revolution affect everyone, and there's no place in China was not affected. Here's the picture of Tibet. Tibet, and then that little boy, it's a Tibetan Red Guard. Cultural Revolution turned the whole country up and upside down. Okay, I talk about the destruction of the family. The guy on the over there. Okay, his name is Zhang Hongbin. Hongbin means Red Guard. He changed his name to Red Guard. So he's absolutely a loyal Red Guard. What did he do? He heard his mother complaining about Mao and the Cultural Revolution. He and his father reported his mother to the party. 2 months later, she was executed. That's how family were destroyed. People always ask me, what did your parents tell you during the Cultural Revolution? Nothing, because they did not trust me. They knew there's just too many stories taking place around them that the children report their parents. So they never really talked to me about anything except just, the trivial stuff. That is how bad the family were destroyed. No trust among the family members. And so in the beginning, the Cultural Revolution was just smashing the old stuff, right? After they toppled down all the statues, they destroyed all the temples, they went to homes, private homes, to look for more 040s. And that's the beginning. And I saw that face. That was chaotic, but at least it was not violent. Kind of like what Chinese Americans think. They're just kind of crazy. They topple down the Confederate statues. Maybe they'll stop there. Nope. Very quickly, it become violent. So this picture of this girl, she was a Red Guard, and she was chosen to be the representative of the Red Guards for the Red Guards rally in Tiananmen Square to put the Red Guard banner on Mao. And so Mao asked, "What's your name?" And she said, "My name is Song Bingbing." Bingbing means gentle, means polite. Mao said, how about violent or warlike? Promptly, she changed her name into Song Yaohu, meaning violence. I want violence. And soon, the first killing took place in Beijing. And it took place in a middle school for girls. And this lady there, she was the deputy principal of that middle school. She was beaten, tortured to death by a group of young girls, including Song Bingbing. And after that, violence became commonplace. In a month, in a time of a duration of a month in Beijing, more than 2,000 people were killed. No problem, no consequence. So why? Because Mao dismantled the criminal justice system. Defund the police. Police were told they have to support the Red Guards. If the Red Guards hit them, they are not allowed to hit back. And they were not allowed to go to campuses. But that's where the initial violence took place. We are not that far from that. The real goal for Mao of the Cultural Revolution is get power, right? And the Red Guards did his bidding. So in the photo, the upper one was just CCP bureaucrat. And they are all being struggled against, tortured, some get killed. And I witnessed, as I told you, I witnessed the struggle station of our governor in Sichuan province. On the lower picture, guess what? That man was the number 2 man of CCP, President Liu Shaoqi. He was purged, struggled against, exiled, and died in misery. He actually is one of the real reasons that Mao wanted to launch the Cultural Revolution, to get rid of his political enemy. And to make the story more tragic, as soon as he was purged, two of his children published an article to denounce him, and in it said, "If my family don't want us, the party wants us. We want to draw the line with the enemy of the state, who happened to be our father." It happened absolutely everywhere during the Cultural Revolution. Families were totally destroyed. Okay, it lasted 10 years. What happened in the end? The Chinese civilization was totally destroyed. Never recovered, not even today. Destroyed. Up to 20 million people lost their lives, and including so many suicides. And I have neighbors who committed suicide because they just could not take that anymore. And then the economy absolutely ruined. Institutions all destroyed, every one of them. And that is the 10-year Cultural Revolution led China to. And we are on the same path. Okay, here we are in today's America. They are absolutely doing the same thing that Red Guards did. They changed the street names. They have struggle sessions of people who just happen not agree with them. They create chaos. They topple down the statues. They use the same formula, the same formula. They fundamentally transformed our educational system. Now it's run mostly by Marxists. They retrained the teachers, right? It started when? Dr. Lindsay will know the detail. It started with John Dewey, with his teachers' college in Columbia University. They started very early. It took Mao 17 years. It took the American Marxists decades. But it started in the Columbia University. Even back then, in the 30s, so many of the school administrators had training in Columbia University. And it's absolutely, Columbia University Teachers College, it's absolutely a training camp for Marxists. And then they changed textbooks, right? They rewrote history. And one of the books they have been using in school is Howard Zinn, People's History of America. Now we have something new, 1619. They have to do exactly the same thing because it's exactly the same type of revolution and exactly the same playbook. And hate. They absolutely teach children to hate exactly the way we were taught to hate. My grandmother was a landowner. And when I first time saw her, she lived in another city. I could not warm up to her. In my mind, she is an evil person because she owned land. She should be hated. And my father never talked about her. It's something for us to be ashamed of. And anyone who is considered black class, they are enemies. We should hate them with passion. Look at these eyes, and look at the face of those young people. Same thing. They were taught to hate. They were taught to hate mostly of what? Conservatives, people with a different view. And that's just, to me, when I saw that picture, I said, this is just too scary. This picture reminds me what I saw when I was in China during the Cultural Revolution. They have to teach children to hate in order to make them revolutionaries. So this is from Lenin. Gave me 4 years to teach the children, and the seed I have sown will never be uprooted. Took Mao 16 years, and here we are. After decades, we are almost there. And you probably heard about this story by Project Veritas of this guy, this teacher, Gabriel Pipe. He boasted he did not need 4 years. He did not need 16 years. He just needed 118 days to change kids from normal or conservative into revolutionaries. And that's exactly what's happening in our schools. And you may want, why do they want to do that? What is the end goal? Well, the end goal is destruction of America. All this have that end goal in mind. But you still ask, why? Why they want to destroy America? I'm sure you all think about it. Why? Power. Just like Mao, exact the same thing. They want absolute power and absolute control of all of us, every one of us, of what we do, what we can say, what we can think. That is the end goal. That's what we're dealing with. What do we do? What do we do? Well, we are organized, we are involved, and I think the only thing is family, faith, and community. And I talk to a lot of, I go a lot of places and I talk, and whenever I meet someone young who is conservative, I say, tell me, why you are not on the other side? Oh, I think my parents, oh, I think my church. I think that's what we have. This, to me, okay, this war is absolutely about children. They need them to be the revolutionaries. So we have so many things going on. But to me, to win this war is to protect our children. And that's why, school is the front line of the whole war. And Moms of Liberty, you are there fighting the war. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, questions? Yeah. Okay. I don't even know I passed time. And did I take too much time?
You're perfect.
Okay.
If you got more to say, keep going. I was just getting ready for questions.
No, I think question would be good.
Okay. Questions?
Well, I've got to say, Han Hao is incredible. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to know, how can I reach out to my friends? I have friends who are from China, from small province in the south, friends who are from Laos and Kenya and other places. They don't trust government, which is completely understandable. I don't trust government. But what can I do to convince them to get politically involved in their communities and to bring them, because most in those communities do not vote. They don't vote locally, they don't vote nationally. And what can we do to bring them into knowing that it is important for them to vote and their voice matters? So things like this, because if America falls, there's nowhere to go.
Yeah. It's kind of difficult, I have to say. A lot of Chinese are hesitant because they're afraid. They're fearful for their family in China. For me, I actually putting them in harm's way. So that's one thing I can say. A lot of Chinese are hesitant. The others, I met a lot of people actually from communist countries like Romania, Russia, and they are part of the fight. They really get it. They know that they can be more convincing when they come out and tell the American people, this is communism. But not enough, that I know, not enough. And the people who absolutely, they experience communism, most of them probably language is the barrier, right? Yeah, so a lot of them come here, they don't speak enough English to feel confident. Just have to give them support. Say, you don't have to tell, a long history, just tell your little experience. Just to hear from those people means a lot to Americans because they use their lived experience. But I think that's one of the reasons, the barrier. And of course, nowadays, more people are listening. Like Dr. Lindsay just told me of people from Russia have been telling the story to Americans and nobody listened. And I think now things has changed. I think people start to listen. And the reason that is that they realize what's going on. And for me, that's very encouraging.
Thank you again for coming here tonight. It's really very striking message. What made the difference for you as far as the change of your thinking from the way you were raised, you're indoctrinated as you're raised? Was it when you came to the United States and saw the difference, or what made you have the consciousness that you have now? I
know. This is actually, my book will come out in October, and told a little bit of story of my, it's very slow going. You know, the people were saying, you know, how? I don't remember when, but it's little by little. The freedom, I never really understood what freedom, never gave it much thought, what really freedom was. And it's little by little, I realized that before, I did not even know, I did not even feel like I want freedom because I never had it. So it's just normal to give orders, to get orders from the party leader and just think the way they ask me to think or allow me to think. It's really gradual. And then, you know, I'm married to an American. And I just, thinking back, I was thinking, those little things that little by little, I really get to understand and appreciate what really individual freedom is. What the, you know, like the rights is from God. That is foreign to Chinese, even today. They always given by the government. And it took me really a long while to really understand why this country is so special. And it's not like one incident, and it took me a long time. But also, I think in the past few years, once I noticed the things that are happening here remind me of Cultural Revolution, I really say, I want to understand what makes this country special. I took so much time reading all sorts of books about the foundings of America, about the founding fathers. So I took this step, and I took the trouble and the time to understand it. And too many, we have this massive immigration. People come here, a lot of them love America, but they were told multiculturalism. Every culture is the same. Your culture, my culture, American culture, they're all the same. So they discourage assimilation. And then the people those people are so proud. We are Mexican, we're this and we're that. They don't consider themselves American. They don't bother to learn. And then that's the goal. That is the goal of the left. And that's a real problem.
Thank you so much. You're just so beautiful and heartfelt, and your story was incredible. So thank you for being so bold to stand up and share your insight, which is really profound. But I think you set up perfectly what I was going to ask, kind of segued, but knowing the founding fathers and the foundation that this country, I mean, believing that for the next generation, and not having that in China, you were saying like so many of the subtle things that creep into our culture, and when you started recognizing the patterns that you went through as a child, how much more, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, it happened in 10 years, and you said even when Colombia, it's been over decades. At what point in the spectrum do you believe we're at? Like, where are we on that timeline, in your opinion?
Sometimes I wake up and say, really, is there any hope? I do feel from time to time how Americans, you know, freedom-loving people can really take that kind of believe those lies. I just can't believe, and that people are afraid to talk. When I came to America, I said, finally, I don't have to have that filter, because I was born not to very good at regulate my speech, and I was warned again and again by my parents, just shut up, just don't talk. And finally I said, I'm here, I can talk. But look around. In my workplace, people are afraid, and the people dare not to talk. And people say, you know, I may lose my job or promotion. And I tell people, please, today you're worried if you talk, and you mind, you may lose your job, you may lose your business. If we let it go, the next time you will lose your freedom, and the next day you lose your life. That is absolutely going to happen if we don't step up and really stop them now. Really, this is absolutely, I told people, it's going to happen. The violence, we already see it. It is absolutely going to happen. More violence, and then we lose more freedom, and eventually we lose our lives if we dare to speak up.
I'm believing in that right there. To change it all back. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate it. In 2021, I saved my son and a daughter-in-law who's full Chinese from Australia and brought her over here with me. And I would take her to go visit with representatives, and I'm very involved in the school up in Sumner County. And I would ask her, so what are your thoughts on this? And she goes, oh, it sounds like the CCP. Sounds like the CCP. And she was just so innocent. She was so taken back by what's coming out of our legislators' mouths and the school, and she was just blown away. So she could recognize it, but when I talk with parents and when I talk to groups of parents and even individuals, they don't get it. And yes.
You know why?
Please tell me why. I'd like to know.
Because they're never taught. They never learn the history. That's exactly why. They don't teach the history, and the media don't educate American people. They know nothing about communism. The things that happened in history, times again, they never knew. They don't know. That's why when the communists showed up in our front door, I said, what? They don't know. And we know because I saw it before. That is exactly, I told so many people history, history, history. That's what I do here, to teach people the history that they never learn. They never learn because they don't want us to learn. History, absolutely.
Other questions? No? Okay.
Thank you so much.
A round of applause for Chi Van Fleet. Such an incredible story, and we're so thankful for your courage to share. It gives me hope. Dr. James Lindsay is an American author, mathematician, and political commentator. He has written 8 books spanning a range of subjects, including religion, the philosophy of science, and postmodern theory. Dr. Lindsay is the founder of New Discourses, an organization dedicated to shining the light of objective truth in subjective darkness. He is the co-author of Cynical Theories, Race Marxism, and the Marxification of Education, Paulo Freire's Critical Marxism and the Theft of Education, which was released just last December. He's been featured guest on Fox News, Glenn Beck, Joe Rogan, NPR, and has spoken on the ravages of wokeism, i.e. Marxism, recently to the Oxford Union Society in Oxford, England, and most recently, the European Union Parliament in Brussels. Please welcome James Lindsay.
Do I have to do? No, okay. She tried to silence me. Censorship. So I want to start off by asking you for a quiz. I want to give you guys a quiz, audience participation. So if you've heard me do this before, don't give it away. I've tricked enough audiences, so if you know the trick, don't give it away. I'm going to define a word for you. I want you to tell me what word I've defined. And pay attention, there's some big words involved. The definition is an administered political economy in which shares are adjusted so that citizens are made equal. What's that word? Socialism. Anybody have another guess? ESG. That's not a bad guess. Any more? It is equity. That is right. That is not the definition of socialism, except that it also is the definition of socialism. Turns out equity and socialism have the same definition. So now you know the goal of this whole thing. All this equity nonsense we've been hearing about, all these DEI initiatives we've been hearing about, are socialism. The goal is to redistribute shares, not just of material wealth, but also of cultural and social wealth, so that citizens are made equal. So we're going to force equality. That's socialism. It's the exact same program. They're just using cultural and social vectors to push it into society. So what we're dealing with is exactly what she just talked about. We know exactly what we're dealing with. This is a huge amount of progress. Everybody here should feel very proud of themselves. Everybody here should be much more encouraged than you probably are. I talk to people all around the country all the time now, and everybody says, oh no, I think it's never gonna end. I'm getting so discouraged. I was hopeful, and now I'm so discouraged. And I think, are you crazy? I can do this in front of a room now, and the second I say this is Marxism, nobody calls me crazy. For 5 years, that's not been my story. In the last year or so, that has been. I can get on a stage and I can say critical race theory, and I don't have to spend the next 45 minutes explaining the basic nuts and bolts, because you got a grasp on it. I can say that this queer theory with the children and the sexualization and the trans and all of this, I can say this queer theory is a Marxist theory that treats being considered normal as a form of special private property that Marx had wanted to abolish. And you can say, yeah, okay, it's a Marxist theory of sex, gender, and sexuality and normalcy, I got it. And I don't have to spend 45 minutes explaining it to you. We have come so far. We've come so far in 2 years. And like we just heard, we're now dealing with something that's been developing for decades. Dewey was working in the 1930s. They've been laying this actually for close to a century to take over America. The purposed part of the project has been at least 50 years, since 1972 really. And here in just a couple of years, we've informed enough Americans already, millions of Americans, who are showing up to events like this. They're already knowledgeable. They ask me hard questions now at the end of my talks. Sometimes I don't know the answers. I ask you what this word is. Somebody says ESG as a possible guess. So they know what ESG is. They know the mechanisms by which this is being done. So you have to be very encouraged. The reason that communist revolutions succeed is the people going through them figure out that they're going through a communist revolution one day too late. And we are now well ahead of the curve. We're making it very difficult for them. We've actually, and you probably don't even know this, we've already defeated, and I'm going to give you guys kind of a long history of communism so you can understand some questions you don't have answers to. We've already defeated a Maoist program in this country, and you don't even realize it. We have a gigantic victory. We defeated a explicitly Maoist program in this country, and you don't even know that we did it. Do you remember when Joe Biden took office? Notice I didn't say got elected. You remember when he took office, what he got on TV and what they said, him and that Kamala woman, all they said over and over again? They said, it's time for unity. It's time for unity in this country. We're going to have unity. And what you didn't know is that in 1942, Mao laid out a formula. He bragged about it in his speeches in, for example, 1957, he gave a very famous speech before the Great Leap Forward. I said it wrong, my mistake. And he said that there was a formula he came up with in 1942 called Unity, Criticism, Unity. And that was going to be the map to transform China. We'll create in the people a desire for unity. And when they have a desire for unity, we'll bring to them criticism and struggle about how they aren't living up to their part to create unity in China. And then we'll have unity according to a new standard, which he called socialist discipline on the other side. You can have all the freedom you want in Mao's China as long as it's under socialist discipline. That's what he says in the speech in 1957, on the correct handling of contradictions among the people, is the title of that speech. So in America today, what we have is that we just want to create a place where everybody feels like they belong. There's going to be inclusion. There's going to be unity. But we can't have unity, unfortunately, because you're a white supremacist. You uphold patriarchy. You're transphobic. So we can't have unity. So what we have to do is enter into what Robin DiAngelo called a lifelong commitment to an ongoing process of self-criticism, self-reflection, and social activism. In other words, if you're young, you're going to become a Red Guard. But you're also going to get engaged with self-criticism after you go to a DEI training based on that equity socialism, where they're going to criticize you. They're going to tell you that you have white fragility, that you're a racist, and if you don't like hearing that, it's because you have something psychologically wrong with you. The American Psychological Association is going to publish a thing, this was 2020, I think, maybe 19, that traditional masculinity is a mental disorder. There's something wrong with you if you don't want to create a place where everybody feels welcome and that they can belong. We're going to have unity according to a new standard. So Joe Biden trots out this idea that now that he's somehow been installed as president, we're going to have national unity, and conservatives around the country said, not on your terms. I remember people saying it, not maybe in exactly those words. I remember people actually laughing. Are you kidding? We're going to have unity after you've just spent the last year destroying us, bullying us, having mostly peaceful protests in our cities? Red Guards running wild in our cities. We're going to have unity now? According to who? You? No. And so we defeated a bid. You can imagine, I don't know what would have happened had we accepted this bid for unity from the Biden administration. I don't know for certain what would have happened. But I do know that we can imagine very easily that we wouldn't just have a diversity officer at work or an equity officer, an inclusive officer. We could have a unity officer. The unity office down at work is going to tell everybody exactly what they have to do in order to have the national unity that Czar Biden called for. You can imagine this. And your transphobia is preventing them from being unity. So we're going to transform your transphobia. We'll get you to confess it in front of everybody. We'll have tears and everybody's going to be sad. We're going to have all this emotional engagement. We're going to go through a struggle session to make you purge yourself of your bad thoughts, your transphobia, your bad influences, and all of this stuff. You can imagine this, but we defeated that. And you didn't even realize we had a gigantic victory because the most successful formula in decimating a population that's ever been unleashed on mankind, we laughed at it, and it didn't take place. So you have to be more encouraged than you might be if you think this is big and insurmountable. They tried to bring Maoism to America in a very naked form. Even, as she said, we don't know the history. We didn't know that was a Maoist formula, and we rejected it. And that we know what the answer looks like now. We know what we have to do. They say, we're going to do this. We say, not on your terms. We're going to do, relationship skills. We're going to teach the kids relationship skills as part of social emotional learning. According to who? You? No, I don't think so. I don't want your relationship skills. We're going to teach our kids self-awareness. Doesn't that sound good? Who defines that? And we're all getting very savvy at saying things like that. According to who? Oh, we're going to have an inclusive environment. Who defined inclusive? We're going to use diversity. What does that mean? Because why is Larry Elder the black face of white supremacy? Why is Dave Chappelle telling jokes from white privilege? You're going to define diversity? No, I don't think so. It's a big threat to our democracy. Whose? These are the attitudes. This is how conservatives are talking around this country now. James Lindsay's a giant threat to democracy. I just had a profile. I have an Southern Poverty Law Center profile now, folks. I'm an extremist. I'm an extremist according to extremists. I'm doing great. So the second that they say these things, we say, according to who? You? I don't think so. And this is the attitude that's rising in this country. So let's have some hope. But let me explain how what we're facing is Marxism, not from a position of lived experience, but from the boring side, from the books. Because there are some questions. You get on the internet and you say this is Marxism, or you try to have a conversation with your friends. You're like, it can't be Marxism. The corporations are doing it. Anybody's heard of Dylan Mulvaney? You might have noticed he's got a bunch of corporate sponsorships. He's getting paid through the eyeballs to make stupid TikTok videos so he can talk to your kids directly behind your back about getting facial surgeries and stuff so you can grow up to be an influencer like him. Number one desired job of American youth right now, by the way, is influencer. Nobody wants to be an astronaut anymore. Nobody wants to be a fighter pilot. Nobody wants to be a nurse. Nobody wants to be a sanitation manager. Maybe nobody ever wanted to be that. I don't know. They all want to be influencers. And so they have an influencer, and they're giving him more and more and more space and attention so that he can be an influencer and tell kids, hey, if you want to be an influencer, all you got to do is get facial surgery. Change who you are. Look how it did for me. We understand that this is what's going on in our country now, though. How do we get that that's Marxism? That's the question. So we're going to go way back in time to 1840s. I think, and personally, Karl Marx published Capital in 1867. It's considered his most important work. If you were to go to a college campus today, even without the kind of red-washed Marxist education, like if imagine it was a real college, and you went to the school and you said, what is Marx's most important work? They'd tell you Capital. They'd tell you to read Capital. Published in 1867. I don't think that's true. I think his most important works were published in the 1840s, the early 1840s. Communist Manifesto was 1848. I'm thinking 1844, thinking a few years before that, when he was much younger. He was 25 years old. He was hot under the collar. He was a zealot. Just like she said, this is a religion. He was writing a theological tract. He wrote a manuscript in Paris. Why was he in Paris? Isn't Karl Marx German? They kicked him out of Germany for being too radical, trying to incite revolution. So they kicked him out. He went to Paris. He didn't get to stay there very long. They kicked him out of that. He went to Belgium. They kicked him out of there. He ends up, London let him stay. The Brits let him stay there till he died. But he's writing in 1844 in Paris this thing that's called the Economic and Philosophic Manuscripts. It wasn't published for a very long time. It wasn't published actually until something like 1917, 1918, something like this. Much, much later. And what he wrote was a religious tract. What he wrote is the true explanation of what is meant by communism, what he meant by actually what we call Marxism today. And it's not what you read in Capital. Capital is kind of like the surface of the lake, and what he had actually written down in 1844 is what's under the water. It's all the depth. You get caught looking at the shimmers on top of the water, and you miss that the Loch Ness Monster's underneath going to eat you. That's what's going on. And what he actually was talking about in those, he did talk about economics, it's economic and philosophic manuscripts, but he was talking about in that was what does it mean to be human? What is a human being is the question that Marxism is most concerned with. And Marx had an answer. Turns out to be the wrong answer. But he didn't treat it like the wrong answer. They just assumed it was the answer. And the answer actually is that humans are socialists. Humans are perfectly social beings. He said that they're called species beings. That was his weird German word for it. Species beings. An entity that lives for the entire species, not for itself, but for everybody else. But why don't people know that they're social? That they're fundamentally socialist at their heart? Why don't they know that? Well, because the capitalists have come along and they've established private property and they've set it up so that they get to benefit from the private property and they make other people work and they can't even see the the real product of their labor. You go to get a job, you work really hard, and they don't give you what you made. You can't see the thing you built and feel proud of it. They give you money, which is just abstract. So they steal from you what would have allowed you to realize that you're a man, a human. And they steal from you the ability to understand yourself as what you actually are, a creator. That which can create, can transform the world around you to serve you, as a matter of fact. He called it humanizing the world. I can go out and I can cut down a tree with my effort. I can take the logs, I can cut them up, and I can make a chair, and now the chair is something I can sit in. I can't sit in a tree, I can sit in a chair. I humanized the tree. I made it suitable for humans. And what we can do is we can humanize the world, not just for ourselves, but for each other. We can humanize the entire world. We can humanize nature and make it suited to our purposes. This is what it means to be a human. And we can humanize, as a matter of fact, humanity. And how do you humanize humanity? This is where we get back to the socialist part. He said, actually, that communism, badly understood, is the hatred of private property. That's a very superficial communism. It's a true communism, but it's a very superficial communism. But real, true communism, he said, is, in his exact words, the positive transcendence of private property as human self-estrangement. The positive transcendence of the idea that we would own anything. Everything has to be shared, because that allows you to remember who you really are, which is somebody who works and lives for the species. What he really meant was people like him who didn't want to work. Everybody else can work and make sure that he has a nice beer hall where he can go get drunk in London, which is what he did most of his time. This is what communism is about. So what's all this capital stuff? What's, Why is it all the capitalism this, capitalism that? Well, he thought the capitalists were robbing you blind of your ability to see who you really are. They were making you think that you have to go work for somebody and you get money and you get to play the rat race game and it's supposed to be this way and blah, 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 and you lost who you really are. Your human self-estrangement. You estrange yourself from who you really are as a species being by working for yourself, for your own individual gain. But the thing is what he was obsessed with, because he didn't want to get a job, was economic. The way that economic factors in your life shape who you are. He believed, you've all heard the saying, that the goal of communism is to seize the means of production, right? That's when you're going to get socialism. They're going to sweep in with the dictatorship, and they're going to seize the means of production. And you think factories, there's your hammer. You think farms, there's your sickle. There's their cross, by the way, the hammer and sickle. But it's not the means of material production, because the means of material production are a means to an end for Karl Marx. And the means to the end is the production of you, the production of man, the production of society. We're going to seize the means of the production of man and direct it to exactly what she talked about, the new man, who knows what? He's a socialist. He's the future, the socialist future of the country, the socialist future of the world. And so for Marx, the reason he wrote Capital and obsessively focused on capital is he believed that economic factors produce you as who you are. Your character, it's called material determinism is the fancy name for this. Your character, your personality are all a result of the class struggle, which is all a result of the division of labor, which is all a result of the existence of private property, that you can take. I can take your private property from you, you can take it from me, we can estrange ourselves from private property, from the meaning of what things are, from ourselves, etc. All of that all came down to the fact that Marx believed what created people for who they were was their economic utility. So once you understand that the goal of Marxism is not to seize the means of production in the factory, but to seize the means of production of who human beings are and what human beings are, until they remember that they're socialists who live for everybody else in the collective, once you understand that, you don't get stuck in thinking that Marx was an economist any longer. He wasn't. The nicest thing we can say is that he was some kind of a theologian or philosopher talking about what it means to be human. But since he wanted to figure out how to seize the control of the means of production of man to make him into something he's not, we could also call him a eugenicist. His goal was to destroy man as he is so he can be reborn as he should be. That's eugenics. It ends in death. But when you're free of believing that Marx was an economist, you can start to understand what happened in the history. So here we're talking the 1840s, the 1860s. Marxism didn't do much, honestly. Marx just kind of got run out of one country after another until he ended up in London. It didn't do much. The Communist League that he was a part of didn't have very much success. We could get into a whole bunch of history of kind of the 18 and 1900s, but it wasn't until 1917 when a plucky Russian who was actually being held by the Germans, got sent back to Moscow to try to figure out what he could do with his new vision for a new Russia. This was Vladimir Lenin. The Germans let him go. They get him all hopped up on Marxist theories that they taught him there in Germany, and they send him back to Russia. He becomes the head of the Bolshevik Party. The Bolshevik Party does a revolution over the poor peasants, destroys the Mensheviks and the other people there in Russia, seizes power, absolute power. We all know the history of the rest of the Soviet Union. For 69 years, it's nothing but a regime of murder, nothing but a regime of oppression. Tens of millions of people die, tens of millions of people starve. I say we all know that. We all don't know that, actually, because we have, again, red-washed education where we haven't learned the true history of communism and its atrocities. We don't know about the Holodomor. We don't know about how Walter Duranty was a New York Times reporter working for Stalin, living in lavish life in Moscow, and he wrote that the Ukrainians are hungry, not starving. Got a Pulitzer Prize for it. We don't know about Trofim Lysenko and his crackpot biology. He believed if you talked to orange trees long enough about communist theory that they'd grow in Siberia. He believed that. He believed that if you took seeds of the same kind, that they had a comradeship among them. So if you took the seeds and you planted them way too densely in bad soil and didn't water them and didn't give them any fertilizer, but read communist theory to the little plants, that they would learn to share resources and grow even better and maybe even transform into better plants. Tens of millions of people starved. It was such a good idea after tens of millions of Soviets starved that the Chinese picked it up, and tens of millions of Chinese starved after Mao took over. Because you weren't allowed to question Lysenko. You weren't allowed to question Soviet theory. That would get you labeled as in China as it was an enemy of the state, an enemy of the ideology, and they would either round you up and ship you off somewhere awful for re-education or dispose of you if they couldn't re-educate you. But the thing is with Lenin actually did not prove Marx right. Lenin, as a matter of fact, proved Marx wrong. And this is a problem for the Marxist theorists who are looking at Marx as though he had the greatest theory of mankind that's ever been written, the, in fact, true scientific history of mankind. This is a big problem because Lenin proved him wrong, not right. Because Marx said that the workers would spontaneously organize and overthrow and seize the means of production in a revolution. That didn't happen. The workers did not organize, as a matter of fact, at all. The Bolsheviks decided to act as what they called a vanguard and to seize power, and then later they would force the people to become communist on the back end after they had power. The workers did not spontaneously organize. They had to send people to labor camps to teach them to be workers. They had to abuse them into becoming workers because it didn't happen the way Marx said it would. It also happened in Russia. See, Marx believed he had the true scientific study of history. The true scientific, uncontrovertible, the science, just like Dr. Fauci. He is the science. He can't be wrong. He had the scientific study, and he said, what's going to happen is societies evolve over time. They develop. They start out as primitive communism, little tribes that share everything, but they're estranged from one another, and then eventually slave economies. The tribes start conquering each other and make slaves of each other, and slavery becomes the new economic model, but that eventually gives way to estates, to aristocracies, to lords and ladies over the land with the serfs doing all the work, a new kind of slavery that's not quite the same as slavery. And then the peasant society eventually gives way to capitalism, where we have this kind of industrial economy like he was looking at and complaining about through Europe, which was paying for all the beer that he was drinking. It was probably Bud Light with Dylan on the can. He was way ahead of his time. Russia wasn't capitalist. Berlin was, didn't go communist. London was, didn't go communist. Paris was, didn't go communist. None of the big centers in Europe went communist, but a backwards peasant society in Russia went communist. Turns out Mao repeated this refutation of Marx a few years later. The Kuomintang was a little bit more developed, the Nationalist Party was a little more developed, but China was by and large a peasant country when Mao took over. It was not by and large an industrial economy, which is what Marx said would naturally turn into a socialist utopia. I hesitated to say a bad word. The one that President Trump used about certain countries. You know which one I'm talking about. So Marx gets refuted, and what do we have? We have these theorists, these religious Marxist theorists in Europe trying to figure this out. We have George Lukács in Hungary trying to figure this out. We have Antonio Gramsci in Italy trying to figure this out. These guys become what are called the Western Marxists. We can't call them the cultural Marxists because Wikipedia says that's a conspiracy theorist, even though that's what they are. Because what they wrote down was, oh wait, the West has something going on that's different. They have cultural values, and they transmit their cultural values from one generation to the next. And because they transmit their cultural values from one generation to the next, they don't want to be socialists. They don't want to organize. They don't want to overthrow their governments. Even though stuff's not great, they care. In particular, World War I was breaking out, and all the stupid workers in Italy, according to Antonio Gramsci, didn't realize the internationalist cause and join in. Instead, they saw that they were Italian, and they cared a lot about being Italian. And the Germans didn't become internationalist worker communists. They cared a lot about being German. And the British cared a lot about being British. They had this weird nationalism thing that was keeping them from wanting to become socialists. Stupid workers. Must be something wrong with them. So what do we do? So Lukács lays out in his book in 1923 called History and Class Consciousness the idea that we have to educate people into class consciousness. We have to educate them in stages. We have to teach them First, that class struggle's real and you're part of it. You're in fact probably, if you're a worker, part of the oppressed class. But that's an ongoing dynamic. You can't be oppressed unless somebody's oppressing you, which means you're both the oppressor and the oppressed. It's not that the bosses and the leaders and the politicians make history. We're all making it together. And if you rise up, then if you realize that you as a class, as the underclass, rise up, then you can have class consciousness and take over the country. You can be a historical agent if you band together and call for revolution and demand revolution and act like wild revolutionaries. Lukács writes this down. Antonio Gramsci ends up, the fascists in Italy don't like him. In 1926, they sent him to prison. The saying was, we're going to send him to prison for 20 years to stop his brain from working. So he went to prison and he wrote what are called the prison notebooks, which is 3,000 pages of some of the most sophisticated communist theory that was ever written. Turns out that was a bad strategy. Fascists don't always have good plans. So they throw him in prison. He writes the prison notebooks, and he writes, which all got smuggled out to Moscow upon his death in the early 1930s. And what he does is he writes down that here's what you actually have to do to overcome the West. It's got all these cultural institutions, religion, family, education, media, law, these kinds of things. You have to go inside of them. You have to go inside of them and change the culture internally, and especially in education, because if you start changing the culture in education, then what you're going to do is you're going to get the teachers. And you're going to change the culture among teachers. And they're going to teach the students. And you're going to change the culture in the next generation. But more importantly, if you want to be a doctor, how do you become a doctor? You go to medical school. So if you get a hold of the medical schools or the schools that lead to medical school, then you get a hold of the doctors. And if you want to change the law, all you have to do is get a hold of the law schools. So if you get a hold of the schools, everybody who's going to become a lawyer has to go through all these schools, so you get a hold of them, and then you change the lawyers. And then the law changes. You want to change politics. All of them are going to go to college. They're going to study these subjects. You get inside the schools and you make sure. This is what Antonio Gramsci decided to write about in prison. And the saying goes that what Antonio Gramsci wrote is what Mao did. And we'll come back to that. It's not known, actually, whether Mao had read Gramsci or not. There are reasons to think he might have. There are reasons to think he might not have. I've read both sides of the argument. I don't know which is true. We'll come back to that. We'll come back to Mao. Because in the meantime, there starts out this new thing in Germany, in Frankfurt, this thing called the Frankfurt School. It was actually called originally the Institute for Marxism, but they thought it was a little too on the nose, so they transformed the name to the Institute for Social Research. See how they just changed the words when people catch on? They were doing that 100 years ago in 1923 when they created the Institute for Social Research, originally the Institute for Marxism. They didn't want people to know what they're really up to. And this ends up getting headed up by the 1930s by a guy named Max Horkheimer. And Max Horkheimer, in 1937, writes a book called Traditional and Critical Theory, where he lays out what's now called the critical theory and defines what's now called critical Marxism. Although they never called it critical Marxism until much later. In fact, probably not until the early 2000s. They didn't want people to know it was Marxism. It was a critical theory. It's a study of things. Academics completely mystified. Doesn't say Marxism, it must not be Marxism. Look, they criticized Marx. They said Marx was wrong. Can't be Marxism. Except it is. Once you free yourself up from the idea that Marx was writing an economic theory, and you start looking at what these guys said, what they were saying is that the terms that society itself, the social contract, that society itself is written on, actually forms a special kind of property. People who have status in the existing culture have a special kind of property that we have to abolish. And so Western Marxism takes these two prongs, this kind of infiltrate and educate prong from the so-called cultural Marxists, which we're not allowed to talk about, in the so-called critical Marxists in the Frankfurt School, and they, by the 1960s, coalesce on this set of ideas that capitalism delivers the goods, so we're not going to overthrow capitalism. The working class isn't going to do it. They're conservatives. Why? Well, Max Horkheimer, the same guy I just mentioned, said, well, it turns out Marx believed, he got asked in an interview in the 1960s, why did you create critical theory? And he said, well, we thought Marx had it right and we realized Marx had it wrong. Marx thought that capitalism would eventually immiserate the workers, and what we found out is that it's the opposite. It allows them to build a better life. And so they won't overthrow society, so they won't be a revolutionary class unless you basically force them. This is why it matters that Russia and China were peasant societies, where you could take people who are right on the edge of that and work them up and get them to become revolutionary leaders. This is why it's taken 16 years from now and it's taking decades in the West, because we have so much more to overthrow. We have so much more to undo. We have lives that we are building generationally. We're giving our kids our houses. We're giving our kids wealth to start off. We're giving our kids better life generation after generation after generation. So we said what we actually have to do, what we invented the critical theory for, is to criticize the terms of the existing society itself. Doesn't that sound familiar to what you're seeing from woke? They don't build anything. Whatever they see out in the world, they just criticize it. That's the critical theory. Another critical theorist, a very famous one, Herbert Marcuse, in the 1960s said the same thing. He said, well, turns out advanced capitalism delivers the goods. So we need a new proletariat. We need a new revolutionary class because the working class, although they should be it, aren't it. He says, well, you know where we're going to look? Racial minorities, sexual minorities, feminists, criminals, outsiders, crazy people. That's going to be the base, the new revolutionary base. And we're going to agitate through identity politics. We're going to agitate the West through cultural factors and cultural property using identity politics as the weapon, and that's going to give us a new proletariat. Because otherwise, the working class will never do it. They like their lives. They go to the job, they complain about their job, but they make some money. They're proud of the work they did. They get to buy their Corvette. They get to wash their Corvette in the driveway on Saturday, drive it around town, feel proud of themselves, watch the game, drink any beer except Bud Light. They're all happy, and they're never going to overthrow a society that they don't hate. And so what Marcuse said is, just like Gramsci, just like Mao, in fact, that's why this is where we come back to Mao. These guys were looking at Mao and saying, how come it's working? What are they doing? Because the Soviet Union's bad. Stalin, murderer, bad. Can't do that. What's Mao doing? For some reason, they don't believe he's a murderer. They didn't. They thought he was doing great. What's he doing that's working? He's infiltrating the institutions. He's changing the young people to become the energetic base that's going to transform society. So what do we need to do? And Herbert Marcuse in 1972 writes a book after he realizes the revolution of '68 is over. They're not going to throw society down that way. And he writes a book called Counter-Revolution and Revolt in 1972. He said, we're going to go into the thing. We're going to go into every job. You're going to cut your hair. You're not going to be a long-haired hippie freak anymore. You're going to take a bath, and you're going to go become a computer programmer. But you're going to bring communism with you to the office. And he said, you're also going to take over education at every level, which led to a Marxist historian of education named Isaac Gottesman in 2016 to write the first sentence of the book called The Critical Turn in Education. What he wrote was, where did all the 60s radicals go? Not to the religious communes, not to yuppiedom, to the classroom. That's the first sentence of the book. And they took over education as a primary objective. And it turns out that they had this handy-dandy dude who also looked off at Mao, and said, what's he doing in China that's such a good idea? This Brazilian guy, Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire's ideas were that education should be political education to be true education. So we're not going to educate kids anymore in reading or history or math or whatever. We're going to use the lesson, the math lesson, the history lesson, the reading lesson, as an excuse to have a political conversation with the kids. And the reason that this took off was because the Marxists in the 70s were listening to this, let's infiltrate the culture and let's transform it from within, but we don't know how. Because there's this problem they called the problem of reproduction. It's not as fun as it sounds. The problem of reproduction is that the society reproduces itself from one generation to the next. You send your kid to school, why? To learn to read, to learn to write, to get a good job. And the second they get a good job and they enter into the world that they like and they're earning money and they got their Corvette and they're driving it around on Saturday, they're not going to be revolutionaries. They reproduce the society. They come to church, they hang out with a family, they have family dinners, they play baseball, American pastime. They become Americans. They're not going to become communists. So how do you get around the problem of reproduction? Well, you can't just charge into the schools and start doing indoctrination. You have to have the power of Mao Zedong to do that, which the Americans are never going to let you do. So what do? Paulo Freire laid the roadmap. You take the existing curriculum and use it as excuses to have political conversations. So when Robin brought up generative themes earlier, that's the fancy academic name Paulo Freire gave to this. You use the themes that are in the lesson. Maybe it's a lesson about slavery. Maybe it's a lesson about hunger. Maybe it's a lesson that's very innocuous. Like you give this is a very famous example. I first heard it in this room, as a matter of fact, in the October sessions about social emotional learning. Jennifer McWilliams said, Johnny is riding in the car with his mom and dad on the way to an amusement park. Amusement park is 50 miles away. They've already driven 30 miles. How much further is to go? Second grade word problem. Sounds perfectly benign, but the teachers are being trained that you say, who's been to an amusement park, kids? Some kids raise their hands, some kids don't. Why is it that some kids get to go and some kids don't? Oh, some people can't afford it. And now they're having a conversation about socialism. My parents won't let me. Now they're having a conversation about parental authority. Does every family have a mom and dad? Well, we only have a mom. Now they're having a conversation about feminism. My family or my friend's family has 2 moms. Now you're having all the sexuality conversations. You're using the very innocuous math word problem as an excuse to have political conversations to do what Freire called conscientization, conscientizing, making conscious. There's, by the way, your definition for woke. Woke is critical consciousness. It is that consciousness that the terms of society themselves have to be thrown down. And what Paulo Freire did was created a way where it looks like the existing curriculum stays the same, but in fact it becomes an excuse to teach children to complain about every aspect of their society with no solution. On the drive over here, I was trying to find a way to explain that a little bit. It's what you would call, instead of being idealistic, that they have an idealistic utopia out there that they're shooting toward, it's negative idealism. You don't know what the perfect society looks like, you know what it doesn't look like, and it doesn't look like this. It doesn't matter what this is. You give them a little bit of power, that's racist too. You give them a little bit more power, that's still transphobic. So what do you have to do? Keep giving them more and more and more and more and more power. It's just, like she said, the whole point is just to complain and to bully and to name call and to struggle and to humiliate and to embarrass until they get more power. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. And Paulo Freire became the vehicle by which this is done. So now we've answered almost all the questions about how this happened. We now know how they got into the schools. We now know how they took over the schools. We now understand very simply that if you get the schools, say the colleges of education, then you get the teachers, and if you get the teachers, you get the kids, and if you get the kids, you get the future. Same thing, by the way, for the Christians in the room is happening in Christianity. If you get the seminaries and you get the pastors, then you get the laity, which is why all your seminaries are full of critical race theorists. Don't believe me? Go look them up. Louisville, Kentucky. Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, largest seminary in the world. Go look up how many critical race theorists it employs as professors. Figure out who appointed them. Cough, cough, Al Mohler. Good Christian conservative man. You get the pastors, you get the congregation, you get the future. This is the same roadmap. But how in the world is it so capitalist? That's where we kind of started. How do we reject the central idea of Marx? How are the corporations the thing that are making our society communist? How do we have corporate communism, but we already heard? Horkheimer and Marcuse, doing the work in the 1960s of critical Marxism, said capitalism allows the worker to build a better life. So we're going to abandon it. And once they stopped pretending to care about the worker, they could side with the power of corporations. All they had to do was get them on board. And this is where ESG comes back into the story eventually. All they had to do was figure out ways to get the corporations to want to do social impact according to their definitions. And so Herbert Marcuse, the same guy I mentioned, most influential Marxist of the 1960s, he wrote a book in 1964 called One-Dimensional Man. In 1964 and 5, its first year of publication, it sold 300,000 copies. He was the guy of the Marxist left in the United States. You have to understand his influence is so immeasurable that, in fact, what I often say is that we live in Herbert Marcuse's world. He wrote an essay, for example, we'll come back to One-Dimensional Man. In 1965, he wrote an essay called Repressive Tolerance. The thesis statement of the idea of repressive tolerance is we're in a very tolerant society, but it only tolerates so far. It's repressive of leftism. It doesn't tolerate that. So what do we need to do? The thesis statement of it in almost, I can't say it in exact words, I've got close to a quote from memory. What he says is, what we need is a new kind of tolerance called liberating tolerance. And what does it do? It will tolerate movements from the left and extend no tolerance to movements from the right, including violence. The right will not just be not tolerated, they will be censored. They will not just be censored. In fact, he said they will be pre-censored, so the thought can't even enter their heads. They teach you to self-censor. They bully you. They mock you in the media. They call you things like deplorables. They disenfranchise you. When there's a riot, all of a sudden it's mostly peaceful and you're not allowed to do anything. I just spent the last 2 days with Kyle Rittenhouse. You're not allowed to defend yourself. He's still defending himself in court for what should have been literally a that night open and closed case of you defended yourself against a threat to your life, or multiple threats to your life. Good job, kid. Go home. Here we are almost 3 years later. He's still defending himself in court. He spent almost a year in jail. He's telling me, oh, when I got COVID, I was in jail. Do you have any idea how terrible that was? Awful. This poor kid. Got to spend the last 2 days with him. Very interesting young man. This is repressive tolerance. We live in Herbert Marcuse's world. The kids go flip out at the State House. We have a trans person, a woman that's trying to be a man or something, murder 6 innocent people at a Christian school, including 3 9-year-olds. And they held up 7 fingers in the State House for 7 victims, not 6. And they turned the shooter, in the first mass murderer in American history who's been turned into a hero. And we've all forgotten about it because we had to make a spectacle out of stupid 3 lawmakers who are now the whole story on every television show. This is repressive tolerance. This is Herbert Marcuse's world. He would be smiling up from hell, as it turns out, looking at this. This is the world we live in. So what did he write in 1964 in One-Dimensional Man? Well, in the second chapter, he gives you the keys to the castle. What he says is, capitalism works, but there's a problem. It's not sustainable. See, capitalism satisfies your needs. And then when it satisfies your needs, you have all your basic food and shelter needs met. Everybody mostly can get decent housing. Everybody can buy groceries. We figure out some social safety nets for the people who are having a hard time. We get some stuff going. Your basic needs are met. Well, now people are going to start making junk like cell phones that you don't know how to live without once you get used to them. So now you have a whole new layer of false needs. And then everybody's going to get their false needs met, and they're going to create a new layer of false needs, and another one, and another one. And eventually the whole thing is going to destroy the world and topple in its own waste. Too much plastic, too many gadgets. That's the kind of words he uses. He says we actually have to learn how to be content with less and a lower standard of living. Those are his words. Or else it's all going to fall apart. Now he points over to the Soviet Union and to China, and he says, well, they got the right theory, but they're not making it work. There's another problem. I said the problem of reproduction education earlier. There's a problem of production. Socialist countries can't produce. Imagine that. When they redistribute so that citizens are made equal, people decide, I don't have to work. Have you ever noticed, by the way, that the whole goal of the Marxist project is that nobody has to work? Is that going to work out? No. It's like a whole religion based on you don't have to go to work. That's their end goal. Nobody works. So the problem here is that they can't produce. So if we could figure out how to make a productive socialism, that would work. And if we could figure out how to make a sustainable capitalism, that would look kind of the same. And so what, in the fancy philosophical language he did, was he made capitalism and socialism into a dialectical pair so that they could be synthesized. And the laboratory turns out to be China. You look at China today, it's not the China of Mao, it's still wrecked. But following Mao, after Mao died in 1976, there was a little bit of a power struggle, and then emerges a new leader, Deng Xiaoping. Nobody talks about Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping is very important. Deng Xiaoping had a saying, I don't know how to say it in Chinese, we can ask Xi. I don't care if the cat is black or white as long as it catches mice. I don't care if we have a market or a command economy as long as it makes China wealthy, is what he was referring to. He was talking to people like Kissinger. I don't care how we do it, we're going to solve the problem of production in China. We're going to create productive socialism. And the way they did that was they started to open up the Chinese market. Rather than doing what the West had always done with a Chinese power, a communist power, and say, we're not going to do business with you commies, they said, no, we're going to let them become our manufacturing base. We're going to take advantage of the vast amounts of slave labor in China to build our products for cheaper. And meanwhile, we're going to take advantage of the fact that there's 800 million people there or 1 billion people there who will buy our products. You might boycott, by the way, Bud Light and do some damage to them. But if you get mad for Dylan Mulvaney doing his little weird dance pretending he's an athlete for Nike, good luck. The Chinese market for Nike is 10 times the size of the American market for Nike, and you're only half of the American market at that. So you're only 5% of the market they give a crap about. You're going to boycott Nike? No, the CCP owns them. They want that Chinese money. And so rather than defeating China by bringing capitalism in and opening it up, Deng Xiaoping outfoxed the Westerners. And what they did was they figured out a way to get rich off of the West and extract, to make it financially and economically dependent upon China in manufacturing, while extracting the mineral resources of everywhere that they could through their Belt and Road Initiative. And they have slowly consolidated their power to give you the monster of the CCP that we have today. And then they started to make deals with the United Nations, which created the ESG, which makes sure that the West can't possibly afford to compete on its own terms. You think maybe shouldn't, war is happening, there's rattling the saber. Maybe we shouldn't have all of our primary manufacturing in China now. Maybe we should bring some of that essential stuff home. Oh no, it violates ESG to do that. We can't afford to do that. It's not possible. And so now you have an exquisite understanding of the national security threat that we're under, and you understand why Comrade Joe Biden stood up on a stage and mumbled like an old man and said we have to become like China if we're going to compete with China. We have to become, in other words, a sustainable capitalist system managed by ESG so that we don't have false needs, so that we can now have a system that can compete with China and its power of command economy. We're not going to have a command leader like Xi Jinping. What we're going to have instead here in America is we're going to have stakeholder capitalism. The people who paid to play like Bill Gates. You know Bill Gates, you know, what did he do? How did he get rich? Microsoft, right? Computer stuff, software. Stole it, yes, yes, yes. But let's give him some credit. Computers. Why the heck is he in charge of vaccines? Oh, because he's rich and he plays the game, so he's a stakeholder. You're not a stakeholder. There's a council of experts, including people like Bill Gates that don't belong there, that are going to decide all the policy in the world for everybody now. Stakeholders. A council of experts that decides, which in Russian has a word that's pronounced Soviet. So they've reinstalled a Soviet over the West that's going to dictate how production is going to be done. And in Klaus Schwab's, the chairman of the World Economic Forum, his words a few weeks ago in an interview said, "We are going to move away from an economy of production and consumption." I'll stop doing the bad German. And into an economy of caring and sharing. So if anybody has any doubts, they say, no, guys, it's not Marxism. It's happening with corporations. It's happening with the banks. They're all into big capitalist things. It's obviously not communism. The goal is to move away from an economy of production and consumption and into one of caring and sharing. That's communism. That's not fascism. That's communism. It's just using fascist mechanisms because they don't care about the working class anymore because Herbert Marcuse said they don't have to. So now you know why they get to use corporate power, because they don't care about the working class anymore. That's it. They haven't cared about the working class ever, frankly. It was just an excuse, but they stopped even pretending to care about the working class in the West by early 1970s. And they started figuring out how to infiltrate the capitalist institutions from the inside in the 1970s. And for 50 years, they've done that. So that gets us to where we are today, going through what we just heard, the obvious parallels. We now know we're going through the American Cultural Revolution. We're partway through. The violence isn't really taking off. They aren't really allowed to get away with it fully. Mr. Rittenhouse was acquitted, after all. It's not quite that bad, but we are at that risk. We understand that our corporations are shoving values on us. So the question becomes, what do we do? She actually said, I wish the slide was still up there. I guess I could press the back button and put it back. It's all about the kids. It's all about the families. It's all about the communities. It's all about the schools. We must protect the children. I was saying at lunch today that this is like a three-legged stool. They have a three-legged stool. One of the legs of the stool is the economy, all that ESG economic stuff. The other two legs both depend on the children. One of them is to rewrite the social contract so that the kids coming up, just like we saw with Mao, as she got to be old enough, didn't know anything except communism. They thought that the society is supposed to be inclusive and sustainable. They thought that they were supposed to be global citizens. And you can tell I'm mixing history and present in one thing. So they're going to rewrite the social contract. That's what Klaus said, to an economy of caring and sharing. But they're also going to create a demand base. They're going to indoctrinate children so that not only will they become activists, but they'll refuse to participate in a company that doesn't share the sustainable and inclusive values. They won't work for it. They won't buy from it. They will absolutely snub their nose at it. They will bully their neighbors for it. Oh, you eat hot dogs? Ugh. I can't believe that. We're vegans. We only eat crickets. Crickets are vegan now. So you've got the economic leg of the stool, but then you have two that require the indoctrination of children. The state today, the left today, does not act like it owns your children. It does own your children, and it behaves accordingly. It knows it owns your children. That's how they act. That's how they think. They are the rightful parents. They have master's degrees. You don't. You don't have a master's degree in parenting. They have one from Teachers College, where they learn to be a communist, where they learned Paulo Freire, where they learned all of this stuff, and they've brought it into the kids' schools, and that the schools are becoming increasingly like hospitals so that they can get all of their essential services, all of their central values taken care of in one place. Mental health services, medical treatment services, plus a pretense of education that's actually activist training, all in one convenient one-stop shop, or whatever it's called. The Walmart of schools. Everything under one roof. Everything else out of business. They act this way because they think that they know that they need your children in order to do it. So what are you going to do? What do we do? I already said there's a ton of hope. We're awake, we're listening, you're engaged with me, you show up to this stuff. You know what's happening in this country now. It's a cultural revolution. You know that it's Marxism, even if you can't go through the details like I just did to tell you why it's not Marxism the way Marxism used to be. You know what's happening. So that means you also know, unfortunately, with great power, and knowledge is power, with great power comes great responsibility. You know you have to do something. So what do you do? Well, maybe you're a state legislator. You're probably not in this room. I don't think we have any here. Maybe you do. They can do some stuff. I don't think we're going to have our politicians save us. And I don't think we should think or hope or ask for our politicians to save us. Yes, go do your homework. Yes, vote for the right ones. Yes, consider running for office if you have an anti-rhino mentality. Yes to all. But I don't think our politicians are going to save us. I think what's going to save us is getting involved in whatever is right around you. It is looking around and saying, what is the next right thing to do, and then do it. It can be something very complicated. You can spend your days reading communist theory like I do, learning to talk about it, make a podcast, write a book, or whatever. You can do that. Most people won't, and most people shouldn't. Plus, I want a job. I'm just kidding. I would love it if other people were doing this, and some people are. It's great. You can do a lot of other things. Moms for Liberty came into being as an organization specifically because a few women in Florida who had been school board moms decided that they were going to read the founding documents of this country line by line until they understood them. So a handful of moms, I think it was like 8 of them eventually, got together and they called themselves Liberty Ladies, and they read the Declaration of Independence line by line. Took them months to get through it. Once a week, coffee, tea, made some cake, whatever you do, sat down, read the thing line by line until they understood it. Then they did the Constitution, then they did the Bill of Rights, then they did the extended other 16 amendments. And they learned our Constitution, they learned our Bill of Rights, they learned our founding documents, they studied the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, they learned the history of this country and liberty. What stops you from getting on the internet tonight, pulling up a copy of the Declaration of Independence and reading it for maybe the second time in your life? What stops you from thinking it's interesting, getting some idea about it, and on Thursday nights deciding you're going to have your kids or your grandkids come over and you're going to talk about what's going on in their lives, and by the way, hey kids, we're going to talk about the Declaration of Independence. The school won't teach them the true history of the United States. Why can't you? Why don't you start making a club, get them together? When I was in Idaho with Kyle, they all like to shoot guns. Make a gun club, take some kids, teach them proper firearm safety, teach them proper use of firearms, and talk to them about what's going on in their lives. Take an organization like this, help support it. Maybe that's with time, maybe that's with money, maybe that's with just doing stupid things like coming and picking me up from the airport when I fly in so I can talk to you. These little things matter. Maybe it's that you're just stuffing envelopes. Maybe it's that you're helping these things that are on your chairs. You're going to the print shop and making sure that they get printed and picked up. You don't have to have a lot of money. You don't have to dedicate a lot of time, but you got to do something. Every little piece counts, and everything you can do to nourish your families, protect the children, mentor children, and get involved in communities, especially through things like churches, because they almost always are so strong in the family connection outreach kind of domain, is going to help tremendously. You're going to take away their primary resource if you start thinking every day, how can I make sure 5 more young people this month don't fall prey to this nonsense? Maybe it's just plucking up the courage to have the conversation. Hey, what are your pronouns? I'm not religious. Sorry. I'm a man. I have no need to answer that question. Why would you ask somebody your pronouns? Don't you have eyes? Put it back on them. Getting engaged and being willing to make a little bit of a fuss, to be willing to say no, is huge. Maybe you do like my friend Chris Elston, aka Billboard Chris, and all you do is you put on a sign on your shirt, or you hang it over your neck. You got a billboard on his chest, and it says, children cannot consent to puberty blockers. And he goes out, who are you going to talk to? He puts a sign on, goes out and stands in the public square, and anybody who wants to stop, he talks to them. He doesn't badger people, he doesn't chase them, he doesn't, hey, come talk to me about puberty. Anybody who stops to talk to him, he gets informed and he talks to them about it. Hey, what's going on in Williamson County? Just go out and have some conversations with people. Make a sign so it gets their attention. Don't put up a table, nobody's coming to a table. Nobody wants a table. Get them going, get them talking, hold a sign, something like this, do a little gimmick. Now you're having conversations with people every day. Every single time you have a conversation, you create another opportunity for somebody to open their mind. She said it exactly. The magic spell that is holding our country hostage is extremely simple. Our young people, and I blame Jon Stewart of The Daily Show for this for most of all, have been taught to hate conservatives. A lot of you are Christians, and in your Christian faith, you know that a lot of people throughout history have been taught to hate Christians. And what was the commission you were given? To go out and speak to them and to live in a way that inspires them to want to learn more. You're going to have to do your part to bridge the gap. You can't run away. We can't all move to Texas and hope for the best. You have to start engaging with people, especially young people. Let them know you're somebody who's safe. I guarantee you a ton of them have questions, a ton of them have doubts. They've come to me and they say, can I confess something to you? People, like young people I barely know. Can I confess something to you? Yeah. Why? Well, I know I can tell you this, and I can't tell anybody else because they'll get mad at me. Well, what is it? I don't think I like this pronoun thing anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. Let them know that you're that person. Let them know that you're somebody that they can talk to about this and be told, yeah, I understand this stuff that's actually happening is crazy. It's not good for you. Yeah, they're trying to use you. She didn't tell us what happened to the Red Guard when Mao was done with them. They were too radical, packed every one of their butts up and sent them out to the countryside. See ya. You get to go harvest wheat for the regime now with the peasants in primitive conditions because you're too much of a problem in the cities, and if you don't like it, see ya. This is what the fate that our woke young people friends have waiting for them. They do not have use in the future regime for a bunch of broken, angry radicals. They're going to get rid of them. You can tell them this. You think you're going to get to paint pictures and have a garden. You're going to the countryside, buddy. You're going to the digital countryside, maybe. Who knows where it is. These are simple things. You have to ask yourself, what are my gifts? Can I talk to people and figure out a way to start getting in places where you can speak with people? Can I talk in front of people? Get something worth saying and get in front of a crowd? Can I just reach to some young people and hang out and teach them some valuable skill? I see some young men in the audience. I just heard a story about a 10th grader in Idaho. Literally just heard this the other day, and he just decided that he was sick of this woke stuff, and he started learning how to do some farm work with his granddad. And he starts talking at school about how he's like fixed a tractor and he's doing all this like normal stuff. Now they told me this kid has a huge problem. He's just an average looking boy. He's a little above average. He's not a great looking guy. He's getting asked out by girls 3 times a day. He has to say no to so many girls because he's normal. I'll tell you a story about me. I went to a hotel a few weeks ago to go on a podcast, and I'm talking to the waitress, and she's like, hey, do you want this? And I was like, no, that's kind of girly. I'd like something more manly. And she said, oh, you never know. men can identify as women today. I looked her dead in the eye and I said, not me. She asked me out. She did. She said, what are you doing tomorrow? Listen, young men, you want girlfriends? They don't want woke men. They want people who can do something. Start taking up leadership around yourself. Start learning to do something competent. Start getting some skills like Napoleon Dynamite, and you're going to get girlfriends that you have too many. You don't know what to do. And of course, you're not going to be taking advantage of that. You're going to be a gentleman, and you're going to get married, and you're going to have an awesome life, and everybody gets to be jealous of how awesome your life is. This is what you get to do when you actually take responsibility and grow your life. So maybe it's you just take responsibility for the stuff around you, like Jordan Peterson, clean your room. There's a million things you can do. If you don't know what to do, think harder. Because what's going to take this country back is not going to be our politicians. It's going to be, first of all, lots of lawsuits. I had COVID last week, pardon me. I cracked myself up with lawsuits. What's going to take this country back is people who have faith in this country. If you have faith in this country, go live that faith, share that faith, in one little thing at a time. I understand there's some activist fatigue here. We're starting to win. Don't give up. Keep having the conversations. Keep telling people. Keep getting people to come to hear talks. Keep sharing articles and podcasts and Tucker Carlson and Alex Stein or whatever you think is funny. Not Andrew Tate, boys. Not that way, Western man. Share things, get it out there, and we will take this country back, and it's going to happen faster than you think. Thank you for letting me come and tell you how we got here, what Marxism is really about, which is transforming man into what he's not, which will end in death every time. Thank you for letting me come and tell you that there are things to do and reasons for hope. Thank you for bringing me back to Williamson County, which is, I live in Blount County, my second favorite county here in the state. Very much appreciated. So I don't have to answer questions now, right? I don't have to answer questions.
All right, thank you, James.
I'm coming down.
I was fine to let him keep going until 9 o'clock. It was fascinating. All right, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. So I think we know ourselves, we know what our values are, but we need to know the other side and understand what we're up against. So the question I try to answer at the end of each 101 is it here? In what form is it in Williamson County? If you read James Lindsay's book, The Marxification of Education, this is the graphic that came to my head. Marxist pedagogy is really propped up by 7 pillars: critical race theory, social emotional learning, comprehensive sex ed, porn in the library, restorative justice, and generative curriculum. So what's kind of exciting, we've covered all of them in the course of the school year for parents. We have systematically broken out these ideologies and done a deep dive on every single one of them. Every single one of them, we have brought in subject matter experts to Williamson County to tell you about it, and we'd had multiple experts. And if we had more than 2, then we had a virtual 102 to give it to you from a couple different angles. So I feel like every single one of these ideologies we have examined from multiple angles, the breadth and the depth of the issue, and you should be able to fully understand everything that is propping up Marxist pedagogy. And therefore, you should know how to start to crumble it with all these little ideologies. One pillar goes and another pillar goes, and knowing is half the battle. So there's 7 pillars. The 7th pillar we covered in 2021, ad nauseum, and that was wit and wisdom. Williamson County has generative curriculum in our schools, kindergarten through 5th grade, 100%. It introduces kids to rape, gender ideology. It's got critical race theory in it. a whole host of age-inappropriate topics. And I've had CNN ask me, well, why don't you want to teach kids about Ruby Bridges? I do want to teach kids about Ruby Bridges. Ruby Bridges is an inspirational story about a courageous little girl and her family. But they use it as a generative theme to go off into this racism, critical race theory, cesspool. And you can see it in the teacher's guide. So when Dr. Lindsay talks in his book about generative themes, if you see that your kid's learning Ruby Bridges Goes to School, awesome. I have no problem with that. But then you see the teacher's manual, which is chock full of generative themes. That's where the problem comes from. So yes, we have covered generative themes, and that video is available on our website, and I think it's over 10,000 views by now. So a year of study. Every topic that we went over, we came from 5 different directions. And when you look at this slide, it represents a lot of work, hundreds of hours of work. But you all are well prepared to take on Marxist pedagogy. At the end of each month, we did an assessment of where Williamson County stands on each ideology, so I've combined them all here. And we had discussion in Moms for Liberty, analyzing this and analyzing that, and what about this, and what about the outcome of this records request. And we would assess where Williamson County stands on all of the issues. And if I do math, like not equity or racist math, just math, you can average those up, and it comes out to 6.6 for Marxist pedagogy in Williamson County schools. Now, it's not a 9, it's not a 10. I guarantee you California is a 10. But the point is we're on that spectrum. And especially before Moms for Liberty came along, we were trending upward. We were about ready to skyrocket because they wanted to hire a DEI consultancy. We stopped to that. We shined a light on that. We made them not even talk about it in the board meeting. They got the report back from the DEI folks, and they're like, okay, never mind. They just kind of put it under the rug. We're not going to talk about it. That is a victory. So we stopped, or we slowed an upward trajectory. But there's a trajectory nonetheless. And Moms for Liberty, me and just a few people, we absolutely can't do it alone. So I appreciate what James said. Find something that you're good at. What is your gifting? What do you enjoy doing? And help. Everybody needs to pick up a shovel and help, because then we are so powerful. And I'm tired. I need help. So going back to, that is how you crumble Marxist pedagogy in our schools. You start knocking out those pillars one at a time. And in Tennessee, we've got good laws. So comprehensive sex ed, they can't really rely on that unless they're breaking the law. Some of the others, like social emotional learning, that's going to be tough because it's entrenched here. But knowing is the battle, right? So you know how to opt out of school surveys, and you know how to talk to your kid, and you know what to look for. So I thought it'd be interesting or helpful to walk through the quotes from some of the names that you've heard from tonight. Paulo Freire, he really is the missing link in understanding where American education is today. It is absolutely essential, quote, "It is absolutely essential that the oppressed participate in the revolutionary process with an increasingly critical awareness of their role as subjects of the transformation." The second quote is all about oppressed and oppressors. It is 100% critical pedagogy and is the cornerstone of American education. Not like when teachers go to like the Teach for America courses or the scholarships or whatever, they learn pedagogy of the oppressed from Paulo Freire. It is one of the most quoted books by our teachers and in the teaching colleges. Fidel Castro, we are proud of the history of our country. We learned it in school and have grown up hearing of freedom, justice, and human rights. Well, that history had to have been rewritten. In a speech that he gave on September 5th, 1977, Kim Il-sung said, "Education is a decisive factor in the revolution and in determining the fate of a nation. Without it, there can neither be social progress nor national prosperity." Herbert Marcuse, since this is the world we live in, liberating tolerance then would mean intolerance against movements from the right and toleration of movements from the left. That's what you heard James Lindsay speaking. And cultural hegemony necessitates enforced repressive toleration. So, definition of hegemony, the predominance of one state or social group over others, in case you're wondering. Max Horkheimer, you heard of him too. He was pivotal in the Frankfurt School. The revolution will not happen with guns, rather it will happen incrementally, year by year. We will infiltrate their schools and bureaucracies, transforming them into Marxist entities as we move toward universal egalitarianism. Sounds awfully familiar. And the Bloomsbury Group, that was another one we haven't really talked about, but it's Bloomsbury, England, a group of elites that would get together and cook up ways to Marxify society. The men and women of the Bloomsbury Group, in undertaking to undermine Christianity, utilized essentially Christian means to do so.
But tonight, because of what we did on this day, in this election, at this defining moment, change has come to America.
I don't think he was lying. On the campaign trail, he talked about the fundamental transformation of America, and when he won that night, he said, change has come to America, and that was the goal. Again, you have to take their words at face value. Now, as James said, the seeds of Marxism has been percolating. They've been percolating for 100 years. Very much so in the last 50 years. Like in the 1970s is when they really turned up the heat. I believe that when Obama took office, he was one of theirs. And there was no more percolation needed. It was like a direct shot in the arm. Marxist ideology, all of these ideologies were just injected into the bloodstream of American education. Hardcore. And those seeds were planted. But we didn't see it immediately. It took a little bit of time for the roots to grow under the surface and for the seeds to pop out. And they were sprouting. And then Trump got elected. I think he was kind of like, oh, trying to stomp this one out, get some Roundup, spray that one. And they didn't like that too much. They were expecting Hillary with the Miracle Grow. And that's why Trump had to go. So now you've got Biden with the Miracle Grow. And it is growing like the creeping kudzu of Tennessee. But we have to stop it. So I'm trying to epitomize where we're at. I kind of came up with like a stand-up routine. I was kind of channeling Jeff Foxworthy. You might be a redneck. You might be in a revolution if statues are being torn down and your history is being rewritten. You might be in a revolution if kids are being distanced from their parents and families are being weakened. You might be in a revolution if your government is acting like your kids belong to them, or if speech codes are being enforced. They, them, he, him, anyone? You might be in a revolution if kids are being sexualized or racialized or radicalized. Everybody think of the images at the Capitol. Okay, as soon as that shooting happened, all over News Channel 5, M&PS students are marching and demonstrating. Why? Because that's what they were taught to do in the classroom. Their reading scores might be in the toilet, but they were taught to respond to a shooting with radical protest. You might be in a revolution if your society is divided into oppressor and oppressed. Check. You might be in a revolution if your government/media, or perhaps government media, is participating in censorship. And you might be in a revolution if religion seems like it's under assault. And I came up with one other while we were sitting here tonight. You might be in a revolution if they removed a black woman from your syrup bottle and put a white man on your Bud Light. So these are the men who successfully employed Marxist pedagogy. And they and others are responsible for the deaths of 80 to 100 million people. Just like Chi was talking about, people just gave up and committed suicide. It was that bad. Did they see the signs of revolution? Did they think you might be in a revolution if this is happening? Was it preventable? Could they? If they knew, could they have prevented it? So I wonder, as we look back on these regimes and the history involved with them, like one guy not up there is Pol Pot. He killed off, what, quarter of his population? So as our kids look back on this moment in time, how is history going to be viewed? That's assuming we raised our kids with actual history. Who are the contemporaries right now? Maduro in Venezuela, you got Xi Jinping in China, Kim Jong-un in North Korea, Trudeau in Canada. Who would have thought Canada would turn into the Marxist state that it is in? And then with the United States, you got Biden looking kind of clueless there on the end, so I had to put in Obama because, it's really all started with him. So, can we stop it? There's no doubt that we're in a revolution. Awareness is huge, and spreading awareness is the mission, and we need your help to do that. So the goal of Marxism is obviously the destruction of way of life as we know it in America, and it would be an unfathomable way of life. We as adults would struggle with that because we know what freedom is, while our kids are being raised a little bit differently, at least by the school system. So I do take heart. I've gone through, just like she said, just like James said, I've gone through periods of cynical darkness of like, we're never going to pull out of this dive. But my pastor recently gave a Christ and Culture lecture series in which he traced revolution and revival throughout history. It's about an 80-year period that these things happen. And not all revolutions are successful. Many of them fail. Why? Well, James has been talking about a revolution attempt in Hungary, and it lasted for about 5 months before it failed. Who made it fail? The parents. Why? Because they sexualized kids too fast, and the parents revolted, and that revolution failed. So as my pastor's talking about revolution followed by revival, that gives me hope. I think that we are either a remnant or we're a revival, and we have to choose what we're going to be. So, recommended reading. I've read all of these books. They're all incredibly valuable. They all come at it from a different angle. I recommend, well, not all of them, with the exception of one. But James Lindsay's #1 recommended book right now is Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism. I have it back there. I forgot to bring it up to the stage. It's like that thick. So good luck with that one, but it's highly recommended. There's many more books on this topic that's going to help you understand Marxism. The more directions that you can approach it from, the better. We're going to have all of that on our website with recommended reading section. So today, we've checked off 2 of those boxes, and then as the end of the month approaches, we'll be working feverishly to check off the rest of them. So keep an eye on the email newsletter and our social media. So there will be a Marxist toolkit in our resource library. We're going to restructure that library just a little bit and probably combine the 2 curriculums into a single generative curriculum section. But keep an eye out, and then we'll have a lot of information there for you. In about 3 weeks, we have Capstone 101. So ta-da, it's finally the graduation event for the school year for parents, and then I'm taking the summer off. But we are very excited to host Pete Hegseth, Michael Knowles, Carol Swain, and Tiffany Justice is coming up from Florida because she wants to meet you all herself. So it's going to be a fantastic event. The ticket page is live. It's there on the events page of our website. Please get your tickets. And I would also advise you to show up early, because if it's anything like the Matt Walsh event, because there will be metal detection, it's going to take a little bit to get everybody in here. So the earlier the better, and we get everyone seated and started. So if you found this event or the things that we put out useful, then please consider giving time or money. But we also desperately need time and help. And also follow us on social media and sign up for our newsletter, because as we wind down this year, we still have another year the next school year for parents has a lot to be excited about. And I not only want to thank the audience, but I want to thank the people sitting in the back of the room, like the 10 or so of my core people, that I could never, ever, ever do this without you. The one that picked up James Lindsay from the airport and had the table set out and got the stage set up and the plants in place and all of the things. Those people worked tirelessly and silently, and I'm so grateful to all of you because I couldn't do it. There's no way. So thank you to the audience, thank you to them, and have a wonderful night.
You set my wheels in motion. I'm going crazy for you. Eyes blue like the ocean. I can see you want this too. Cause you've been looking at me all night, trying to figure me out. I just wanna let you know that I ain't playing no games. Baby, you won't change. I only want you. I wanna kiss you before the sun goes down. It's what you're doing. It's making me feel like I'm falling. And when you're moving, I can hear my calling. There's no one else here that I see but you. It's what you're doing that's making me feel like I'm falling. Yeah, I'm falling in love. Yeah, I'm falling in love. I wanna kiss you before the sun goes down. I wanna kiss you before the sun goes down. It's what you're doing, making me feel like I'm falling. And when you're moving, I can hear my calling. There's no one else here that I see but you. It's what you do.